Okay, Madam Chair, Mayor Smith, we are ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it is 4 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order. I have a motion moved by Bill McDonald and seconded by Tom Dewey that the agenda for the regular council meeting for April the 26th, 2022 be approved as. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
No, there is not.
Okay, so to be approved as presented. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in general nature thereof of any item on tonight's agenda by any member of council? Seeing none, we'll note that in the minutes. Motion moved by Tom Dewey, seconded by Bill McDonald, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held April the 12th, 2022 be approved as presented. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Mayor's remarks for the go.
All right, yeah.
I have a proclamation to read. And this is a proclamation of Emergency Preparedness Week, May 1st to May 7th. Whereas the goal of Emergency Preparedness Week is to raise community awareness and the need to prepare for the possibility of an emergency. And whereas the recent pandemic, environmental weather events, and the growing global insecurity makes emergency preparedness even more relevant in all of our lives. And whereas everyone has a responsibility to take what steps they can to be prepared, to prepare themselves and their community for an emergency. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Central Frontenac hereby proclaims the week of May 1 to May 7th, 2022 to be Emergency Preparedness Week within the theme of be ready for anything. And further, that all residents are encouraged to make a plan, build a kit, stay informed, and try to participate in educational activities on emergency preparedness. Very good advice for all of us. Okay.
And the chief is going to put it on our website as well as on the Frontenac.
Okay. So it will be on the website and in the Frontenac news. All right. So that's the proclamation. Under Mayor's remarks, the only other thing that I have to add is that things are starting to open up in our community. I took part in the Legion supper on Friday night. About 30 people, 40 people came out, and I went to the Lions Club breakfast here on the Saturday morning. People are still very good at staying in little groups and separating themselves as much as possible. Some wearing masks and some not. And again, COVID is still with us, very close to us, so we need to be careful. Sherry's not with us tonight. Does anyone else have anything to add? A reminder that there is a meeting coming up this Thursday at
6:30 here at this hall. It's a joint of all the Frontenac municipalities if you wish to run for council. And Fred Dean is doing the presentation that he did like 4 years ago. He did the same thing. Also, too, the first week in May, we have 2 meetings. We have the one with the planner, with Glenn Tunnick to deal with the zoning bylaw. I believe that's the 3rd. And then on the 4th is the one with the county having the EOR presentation, which you will receive an email. It's going to be virtual.
New council presentation, is that virtual?
No, it's in person.
It's in person.
Here at this Osa Hall, 6:30.
Okay, that's it for me. No one else has anything to add? All right, let's go on then. We'll go to our staff reports, and the first is Public Works. And before Tyson starts, I want to introduce our new, not new really, but new to us because we haven't seen it in person, Noah Greer, who's at the back. Noah, this is stand up. Oh, this is the fellow we hired a few months ago, but we've only seen him masked up. So now we get to actually see how tall he is and how good looking he is. Welcome, Noah. All right, Tyson, now it's your go here. This is, first of all, this is the preparedness.
Yeah, Georgetown.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, just be right with you. So our first item is resurfacing of the Crow Lake Road. And I have a motion moved by Bill McDonald and seconded by Tom Dewey. Whereas a request for tender, RFTPW 2022-07, was released on March the 28th, 2022, with bid submissions received on April the 12th, 2022, for the procurement of a contractor for the resurfacing of Crow Lake Road. And whereas the Public Works Manager has reviewed the bids and has evaluated according to the criteria outlined in the RFT, and is recommending to award Gamble Sand and Gravel Limited as the successful contractor. Now therefore be it resolved that council approve the recommendation of the Public Works Manager and award Gamble Sand and Gravel Limited as the successful bidder in the amount of $459,438.12 before HST. And further that the Public Works Manager be authorized to issue a purchase order for the work. Any questions or comments for Tyson? Nikki, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. So Tyson, I'm a little concerned that there's a $60,000 difference, or 70 even, sorry, between Gemmell's and the next lowest bid. What could you kind of justify that, please and thank you?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Gowdy, without revealing contractor unit prices, all the unit price list, it was small increments of savings on each unit. Bigger ones were gravel savings, the Gemmell's having the closest aggregate source, and a good price on double surface treatment, but nothing crazy, no big huge gaps in unit pricing.
Thank you. Sydney?
Tyson, do we get some kind of warranty with our roads when they do a road? Like, do they give us 2 years, a year?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Kelsey, this is a 24-month warranty period on this service. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Anything else? Right, no more questions? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Nice to have gotten these contracts out early too, ready to go. Right? Next, moved by Cindy Kelsey and seconded by Bill McDonald. Whereas a request for tender, RFTPW 2022-10, was released on April the 1st, 2022, with bid submissions received on April the 14th, 2022, to procure contractor unit pricing for the supply and placement of gravel. And whereas the Public Works Manager has reviewed the bids and has evaluated according to the criteria outlined in the RFT, and is recommending to award Gamble Sand and Gravel Limited as the successful contractor. Now therefore be it resolved that council approve the recommendation of the Public Works Manager and award Gamble Sand and Gravel Limited as the successful bidder in the amount of $308,193 before HST. And further that the Public Works Manager be authorized to issue a purchase order for the work. Discussion on this one? Tom and then Bill?
Thank you, Your Worship. The only question I had on this one, Tyson, is that could I get a list, or could we have a list of the roads that we're going to receive gravel this year? And one road that I'm particularly interested in is the Cranberry Lake Road. It's right on top of bedrock in most places, and I just wondered if we could get a list, or is that road going to receive any gravel this year?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Dewey, on the second page of the council report, you'll see that in the south end of the township, Fourth Lake Road, Wilkinson Road, Hinchin Brook, Fourth Lake Road and Wilkinson Road will be the ones receiving most of the gravel in the south. In the north end of the township, Clark Road, Brewer Road are the main roads receiving gravel in the north. And then we put a big stockpile each yard for problem areas in each end of the township.
Thank you very much. My apologies, I didn't go down far enough on your report, so this is slightly on the rest. But thank you. I hope that Cranberry Lake Road will get somebody right. Thank you.
That's okay, Councilor Dewey. There's a lot of reports this meeting.
Yes. Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my question was answered by the question that Councilor Dewey had, but the Clark Road, that's mainly in Kennebec District, am I correct?
That's correct.
It's about half.
Yeah.
Sorry, I distracted.
Through Madam Mayor, Councilor McDonald, I have to check on the map exactly which old municipality it lies in, but I think it's shared. I think it's shared between the two older municipalities. Is that what you're asking?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion? Carried. Moved by Bill McDonald, seconded by Tom Dewey, whereas a request for tender RFQ PW 2022-11 was released on April 1st, 2022, with bid submissions received on April 14th, 2022 to procure contractor unit pricing for the supply of screened winter sand to the Hinchinbrook Garage. And whereas the Public Works Manager has reviewed the bids and has evaluated according to the criteria outlined in the RFT and is recommending to award Mulroney Trucking Limited as a successful contractor. Now therefore be it resolved that council approve the recommendation from Public Works Manager and Mulroney Trucking Limited as a successful bidder in the amount of $117,910 before HST, and further the Public Works Manager be authorized to issue a purchase order for the work. Any discussion on this one? All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Tom Dewey, seconded by Sidney Kelsey. Whereas a request for tender RFT PW 2022-12 was released on April 1st, 2022, with bid submissions received on April 14th, 2022, to procure contractor unit pricing to screen and supply winter sand for the open garage. And whereas the Public Works Manager reviewed the bids and has determined that in accepting the lowest bid, the operating budget for winter sand would be over budget by $65,000 to $75,000. And whereas the Public Works Manager is recommending to council to reject the lowest bid and use the sand from our own pit on the Ardoc Road, which would cost approximately $8.67 per ton to stay within the 2022 budget. Now therefore be it resolved that council approve the recommendation of the Public Works Manager and not award this tender at this time, and to proceed with supplying the sand in-house. Discussion. Brent?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tyson, if we're doing this ourselves, are there going to be any issues with regard to manpower and just making sure that, you know, we have the equipment and staff available to make sure we cultivate our own supply?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councilor Cameron, the breakdown that you see in the report with municipal staff hours, and that actually, it's about $1,400. That estimate is based off just the supervision and administration of the mostly collecting truck tickets and verifying quantities. The trucking and the screening equipment, those prices are actually based off hiring a contractor to do that work. And the trucking especially, that's procured from our request for contractor unit pricing. So that's this estimate is actually based off of hiring all trucks. That includes the operator and fuel to do this contract. So we'll just be supervising this, and we have inside that $1,400, we accounted for our loader operator who stacks the sand and mixes the salt in our domes, because whether we put a tender out or not, we like to do that part ourselves, because we like to mix the salt ourselves, so it's perfect. But no, this shouldn't tie up staff hours.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Certainly with gas prices the way they are, we have to do something to stay within budget. I see today they're about 81.9. That's 7.
I agree, Madam Mayor, and I truly feel for the contractors who took the time to bid on this, and I thank them for that. It would be frustrating, especially local contractors who maybe got excited to get the low bid, but you know, sand is a finite resource, and when we own our own, sand, we need to pick and choose the years, because it's the taxpayers' money. I want to support the local contractors that want to get these jobs, but when we've got our own resource like that, we've got to pick and choose the years where it makes sense for the taxpayer to spend that money. So this is a year, unfortunately, where I can't go with those tender prices. I have to try to save some money and hopefully get better pricing next year. Well, hopefully fuel comes down. Thank you.
For sure, yeah, and these contractors being local are taxpayers as well, so I think this is a business and we have to run it like a business. Okay, I have a motion moved by Cindy Kelsey and seconded by Bill McDonald, whereas the Public Works Department has procured unit pricing to pulverize and resurface Wilkinson Road, and whereas the Public Works Manager has negotiated with Greenwood Paving to extend their unit pricing that was provided this season for other municipal tenders and apply those unit prices to the Wilkinson Road project. Now therefore be it resolved that council approve the recommendation of the Public Works Manager to award the pulverization and double surface treatment of Wilkinson Road to Greenwood Paving in the amount of $133,434 before HST. And further that the Public Works Manager be authorized to issue a purchase order for the work. Discussion. Right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tyson, I'm wondering if you could just sort of confirm how much of Wilkinson Road is going to be covered by this, just a general estimate, you know, percentages, or you could say from this spot to this spot.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Cameron, it's from the Stone Mills border at the south end of our Wilkinson Road to just north of the train tracks. Had an address in my head, but it's not, we're only resurfacing the portion that is currently hardtop surface, that's currently tar and chip. The project does not extend onto the gravel portion of Wilkinson or Marion. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. I know that we talked about gravel earlier in another item, and you had talked about that. I'm assuming that the gravel that you referenced for Wilkinson Road in the previous report is going to take care of a good portion of what's not covered under this particular contract, correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Cameron, that's correct. I was asked actually outside of council meeting what the extra items, or I forget how I worded it, the additional items in the contract are. It's not to extend the project past the train tracks any further. There's a little bit of ditching, a little bit of a couple culverts, and that'll be done either in-house or with contracted services as well. But the gravel tender will take care of all the other back roads that are in desperate need right now, such as Wilkinson.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Here. Is there anything else for Tyson? I think that is all. Any questions or comments? Anything you'd like to tell us, Tyson?
I don't think so. Thank you, council. That was a lot of probably numbers and a lot of dry reports, but yeah, thank you for allowing me to get to this meeting outside of my regular council meetings, get these out the door, because unfortunately with the cost of fuel, we got some high tender prices this year, but getting out as early as possible is definitely helpful. As the contractor schedules fill up, the prices just drive up higher and higher, and we're gonna try our best to stay within budget even in these tough times. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dr. We're getting all that perfect. All right, now we're at finance and treasury. There's that microphone.
Development charges, I think that's from that session.
Yes, MFOA offered development charges 101 session that Kathy and I attended before, and we attended again today. It was educational, and I think will be beneficial if council approves it.
Good. We learned lots.
Always.
That's why we sent you to these things, right? Okay, I have a motion moved by Bill McDonald, seconded by Tom Dooley, that council approves the check distribution reports totaling $1,027,236.49 as prepared by the treasurer. Any discussion? Bob?
Thank you, Worship. Michael, I may have asked this question before. It's with regards to Frontenac municipal law enforcement. And I believe we've asked them to supply what type of calls like that they're doing for this money. We paid them $5,000 for the 3 months, January through March. And I think we've asked them before for a list of what they're doing. And we haven't seen any reports. A type of call, like, I mean, I'm not asking specifics, I'm just asking for the type of call. Garbage, a lot of garbage calls, dogs barking, somebody running their generator, like what calls are they doing?
Through your worship, Councillor Dewey, those three on there, I'd have to find where they are. It'll probably take longer than just answering what's coming to my mind. They may be for animal control, the ones that are on here, that's about $1,500 a month. But in terms of the bylaw calls, we can certainly look at what invoices are coming in and summarize it if Donna doesn't have something already. I don't know.
So this is not bylaw, okay, this is, okay.
I can find it and let you know.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we'll pay the bills. All those in favor? Carried. Okay. Next is apportionments. Motion moved by Tom Dewey, seconded by Cindy Kelsey, that council approve the following apportionments of assessments as recommended by impact in 2021 and 2022 as applicable for the following roll numbers, and we have a number of them there. Does anyone have any questions on any of those properties? None, all those in favor? Here.
Madam Mayor, while you're writing, if I may address Councillor Dewey,
Yes.
those three invoices are for animal control. Those
Oh.
particular ones on this
Not
chapter,
bylaw.
not bylaw, no.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay.
But still, I think having a report of what the bylaw enforcement officers are doing for us without names would be something that we should probably start taking a look at.
Yeah, and then I'm envisioning like the fire reports, number of calls per sort of category or something.
Yeah, sort of what the issues are.
We'll slide it to Chris.
Okay, good.
I'll speak to that.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, motion moved by Tom Dewey, seconded by Bill McDonald, that council accept the revenue and expenditure budget to actual variance report for the period ending March 31st, 2022 for information. Any discussion? Brett?
Just a quick question, and I apologize if it's a basic question. We're talking year over year when we look at these percentages. We're not talking like the whole fiscal year saying we've used up 96% of X. I might not be reading it properly, so just want to get clarification.
So through Councillor Dewey, Councillor Cameron, I do look at the whole budget. So if we set $10,000 and we've spent 2,500, then there's 75% left to spend. And do I have 75% of my year left to spend? That's what I'm focusing on when I look at it, to make sure that, I mean, obviously there's seasonal impacts to take into account, reserve transfers and other things. But I do look at the yearly budget that we set and where we're at with that in terms of revenue collection or expenditures. Okay. And I love basic questions, they're good.
Thank you and thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion? Carried. Moved by Bill McDonald, seconded by Cindy Kelsey, that council accept this investment report as prepared by the treasurer for information. Any discussion on the investment report? Brent, and
I'm
then.
going to show up like a bad penny at this one, but I just have a quick question. I noticed in the write-up that the interest rates obviously are going up and the bond yields are going to go the other direction. Is there any indication from the one fund that the mix is going to change, or is that something that we have some say in?
Well, that's a great lead question, Councillor Cameron, and I did not pay you for that. So under the legal list, the percentage that we invest in, we've invested the same percentage as the gas tax fund to be a very conservative, but still get some interest. It's in our control right now. The prudent investor standard would enable us to make that switch to adapt to the market quicker than what we have here. We've always kept the same percentages. and it's done well, but I don't claim to be an investment expert at all. A lot of the notes in the back there come from Keith Taylor from One Investment. He's obviously has his pulse on the market better than I would have time for. So basically, to get back to the summary of the question is, we stay with the same percentage right now, but we could reallocate our percentages quicker with under the prudent investor standard if we go to that at some point. I hope to bring a report at some point this year to council. Oh, sorry.
Oh, thank you, kind of on the same line. In light of the current inflation and increased bank rates, do you feel comfortable and with our current investment portfolio? And I guess you've had discussions with One Investment, and I mean, are you guys sort of comfortable with the way we're going?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Dewey, yes, because I think we set those rates based on more educated people than myself in terms of safe percentages, so that we protected our investment, our capital in there. Yes, ultimately, quickly, yes. I don't talk to One Investment on a regular basis. You know, on the MFOA board, and I am on the, I can't think exactly what it's called, peer advisory group to the One Investment. I have more influence that way in talking to them, but we don't actually have like a once a month meeting or a once a year meeting. I just reach out when I need to.
Yeah, to you, Madam Mayor, Michael, most of our investments are actually readily available if it was an emergency. Am I correct in saying that? Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor McDonald, yes, I believe it used to be within 24 hours. I think now it's within 48 hours and we can get that money back. But I'm very happy that we invested money. I don't feel we have a lot of money invested, and I don't want that to come across the wrong way, but we won't need that money. We have enough money in our bank account to run operational wise, but that is one thing that under the prudent investor standard is you can only invest cash that is not needed immediately, and that time frame is very vague in, I'm going to say, the regulation. Some people deem it as the next 18 months. I think the City of Toronto put it as 24 months. So it's whatever comfort level that council's with at that point that we could invest whatever extra money that wasn't ready or wasn't needed right away. But again, to get back to your question, because I talked too much, yes, we can get it back quickly.
Madam Mayor, I'm just a little concerned with what Terry Gervais is going to tell us later.
I wouldn't worry too much. I'll wait outside. But if I can add one more comment, Madam Mayor, if we had left this money in the bank account, I believe that we would have been, we've made, if the prices stay up, of course, $37,000 more than what we would have had if it stayed in the bank account. So I still think we're making a great decision. I just think we could do better.
Yes, okay. All right, all those in favor of the motion? Here.
Good job.
And that is it for Michael. And Chris is coming to the table.
I am.
Motion moved by City Council, seconded by Bill McDonald, that council receives the CFR activity report dated April the 26th, 2022 for information. Any questions or comments on the information report? Hearing none, all those in favor? Here. Moved by Victor Hayes, seconded by Bill McDonald. Whereas the request for quotation was released on March the 8th, 2022 for a mid-size all-wheel drive SUV and closed on April the 8th, 2022 with no submissions received. And whereas the manager of emergency services / fire chief received a call from Brady Ford about the deadline to inform him that they are still willing to submit a price on a mid-size SUV. And whereas Schedule A to the procurement policy provides that non-competitive pricing may be justified in a situation where no bids were received in a competitive process. And whereas the manager of emergency services fire chief is recommending to council to accept the quote from Brady Ford for the supply of the 2022 Ford Explorer. Now therefore be resolved that council approve the recommendation and accept the quote from Brady Ford for the supply of a 2022 Ford Explorer in the amount of $52,875 excluding HST. And further that the manager, emergency services / fire chief be authorized to proceed to obtain a purchase order for the vehicle. Discussion. Philip.
Seeing that we received no bids and you got one quote, is there an opportunity for us to go out to other dealerships now and get other prices, or at least 3 prices to know what the prices are?
That's really, Madam Mayor, thank you. So I'm not sure that if that's what you want to do, that we could do that. I'm not sure the procurement would allow that or not. I have to check with finance. From what I understand, the discount that we're getting on this vehicle, you won't get with General Motors. I know that for a fact because they told me that. So I did call with the other dealers that I notified of the RFP, and they said that they could not get a supply of vehicle. That's why they didn't quote on it. So I don't know what success we've had with that.
Supply is wild in the industry right now. All over.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, the wait on this is going to be 5 to 7 months.
Okay. Any other questions? Bill?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, this price seems like it's pretty unreasonably low for that vehicle. And I'm just wondering if this is something they had in stock or if it's something a long time getting.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councilor McDonald. And no, it's not in stock. It's the police package. So we're getting the municipal discount on that. So that's why. So I was quite surprised at the price myself.
Take it while we've got an opportunity. Nikki? Oh, and Brett? Okay.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Chief, so we had budgeted at 80,000 in the budget, so the difference 30,000, will it go back into the reserve for the next vehicle replacement?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councilor Gowdy, I would hope so.
And then microphone's up.
So I have a fleet schedule that I've done up for the finance for Michael. I'd be willing to share with everybody. So what I've done is I've forecasted all our fleet to 2042. And so what I've done is I've tried to, when we do have a vehicle that comes under the allotted funds, that we do keep it in the reserve. However, finance is a different way of doing things.
So through Councilor, Madam Mayor, is that we have normally just whatever we've saved has just gone into that main working fund reserve. It doesn't mean, and if we can change the resolution to add, the difference that we save does go into the fire reserve, we can easily do that. That's of course me with the auditors to say, well, why did you put this in here? Why didn't you just make that decision? But in general, it's just easier plus minus or whatever has gone into that working fund.
So we don't have a specific, like it's just an overall reserve. We don't have specific breakdowns in the reserve then.
So we-
certain things.
Through Madam Mayor, Councilor Gowdy, sorry,
I'm
think
sorry.
for a second, my brain's thinking, surprisingly though, is that we do have the different reserves for the different departments, and it is nice to, if somebody's worked hard, like you can see Tyson's done earlier, it's nice to reward that department and put it in there. The concern is that is somebody going to overinflate their budget at that point? So there's pluses and minuses of doing it each way. So we've just historically always put it into that one working fund, but when there is this much significant savings, I think it's right to put it into that department. Don't tell Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, I was just wondering, this might seem a strange question, but the type of vehicle we're looking at, that's not one that we normally would get for the fire department. So I'm just wondering, is this type of vehicle comparable in other fire departments, like what they're doing in South Frontenac, what they're doing in North, and maybe Stone Mills? Is this the type of vehicle and its specifications? Is this something that would be normally found in a fleet in a neighboring fire department?
Madam Mayor, Councilor Cameron, I would say yes. An SUV is so much more practical for a number of reasons, for transferring equipment and so on, and bringing things to the scene. Your incident commander would also have the accountability pod probably in the back of the vehicle. So that's you're protecting the equipment for the accountability and so on. So it's a much more practical vehicle. I think the price is probably, this is very attractive. This price is compared to even a pickup truck is over 60,000. So I mean, to get the opportunity to get an SUV at this price is beneficial for us for sure. That's what I've had with my career for the last 20 years as chief. So it's worked out much better than a pickup truck.
Probably easier on gas.
It is a little easier on fuel, yes. But it's also more practical just for general use and that. And if there's a training event that you guys have to go to, or guys and gals, then we can load our equipment in the back of the vehicle and send it off with them. They're seated for 5 people there.
Would council like me to add a note that says any savings to be put back into the vehicle fire reserves? Or just leave it and let Michael sort that out?
If I may, Michael would appreciate it if council would like it, because then when the auditors come and say, well, why, seriously, look at my budget, what the reserves were in, why is anything different from that? It would support me with the auditors,
Okay, are we?
if council wants to do that.
So the mover is Victor and Bill. Are you okay if I add and that any savings be put? Okay, and savings.
Thank you, council, for that. Having the reserves and that makes it a lot easier for us to figure things out as we go along. So the fleet, the way I have it set up is it's a 2% increase every year. So there's funds that go into that fleet reserve, and Michael and I have been working back and forth with that. So we're not falling behind. So this year we didn't put any money in because we got the truck coming, the upper tanker 24. So next year Michael will put 325 in there. And then when the truck is delivered, then there's another balance. So we're not getting hit with the whole 500,000 or $500,000 when the truck is delivered. So.
Okay, so Cindy, go ahead.
Are you thinking of electric in the near future? Because there's going to be a lot more money and you're looking at probably 100,000 for this vehicle electric.
Electric for small
like an
vehicles?
SUV like this or some of the trucks?
It's something certainly we can consider if we ever get charging stations. It's something
Charging stations all over the place.
When they get the Menard.
Okay, so the motion has been meant to add and savings we put into the vehicle reserve and any savings. Okay.
Fire reserves.
Oh,
Just so the auditors.
Thank you.
vehicle reserves. Fire
Reserves.
Okay, fire vehicle reserves. Okay, no more questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next, the motion moved by Victor Hayes and seconded by Hope Smith. That's signature. The council received the report from the manager of emergency services fire team regarding recruitment and certification for information. Questions or comments? Brent?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, I mean, my heart goes out because I think the province is pretty much mandating this and you don't have a lot of latitude. I was struck by a letter from the fire marshal's office as a quote that with this regulation, we're not asking firefighters trained to a higher level than they already are. So it looks like what we're essentially doing is we're going to be paying $1,500 per student to status quo. And I'm just wondering, you know, how many of our firefighters are going to have to undergo this process? And is there any indication from the province or the fire marshal's office of any enhanced training and how much that's going to cost?
Madam Mayor, Councilor Karen. So this is a pretty frequent question going across the province when the deliberations are going on in February. Cost is certainly a factor. It was expressed that there's a lot of concern on that. They tried to sell this at the beginning when they closed the fire college that we were actually going to save money. Well, obviously, this isn't true, but they are looking at the fire marshal's office looking at possibly giving a discount on training manuals, which are quite expensive. They're like $75 a piece. And maybe some other type of funding, but they're not going to give us any kind of breaks on the training of the remote training centers. The remote training centers, they have to keep to maintain them, and then they have to pay their instructors. So I don't see that the province is going to give us a break on that. So it's unfortunate that way. So we've got 13 so far. We booked for 15 people to go for firefighter 1. I'm giving you that cost as a general because when I can bring the instructors here from Leeds, it's considerably less. It's $800 if they go to Leeds, it's a $1,200 bill. But I have to also pay the firefighters for going on this training, and then we've got meals and everything else. So I'm trying to give you the worst case scenario right now. So for firefighter 1, we've got this group. There is a clause in the regulation that says for legacy, so it's sort of we're hoping like a grandfathering, if you can call it that. We're going to really have to dive into our records to find out who we can get into that legacy. And then we've got firefighter level 2 that we're booking in the fall, as I did in the report, which will be the additional 15 probably again in the fall. So we did budget for this. We knew we were going to get hit. The province is somewhat increasing their level of advisors and instructors, but I've been talking a lot with Leeds, Lyndhurst, and they're having a hard time keeping up. So they're actually booked out 6 months now. So it's a real struggle for everybody.
I just have one little follow-up, Chief. So we put our firefighters through this. How long does that certification last? I mean, obviously it's not infinite. There's going to come a point in time where they have to renew. Presumably we're back at this again.
Through Member Council Karen, actually they have not said that. Firefighter level 1 and 2 is in the MPA 472 is the same as a full-time firefighter. So once they meet that accreditation, so once they have that in place, it's just basically general maintenance and keeping up with the standards. So that is, but they'll always be certified. So they're at that level that stays there. So it's not like it's something that say, okay, you're going to have to renew it in 5 years of a driver's license or something like that. It's not like that. So I mean, we continue with our training programs, and NFPA standards will always apply to those training programs. So and at the tech level, at the 1006 level, which is a water rescue, ice water rescue, and there is confined space or hazardous materials response. That's another level that we're going to have to look at to maintain that. So that will come in with our community risk assessment and our fire master plan. So then council will decide what services, I think I've told you this enough, but what services we want to provide as a fire service to the residents in Central Frontenac.
Okay, Bill, and then Tom.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the fire chief. After this training actually happens, what do you anticipate the number of firefighters that we might lose to higher paying departments somewhere else, rather than being able to keep us here?
Through Madam Mayor, Councilor McDonald. So there was a double header issue. Are you familiar with that? That was years ago. So that's gone now, right? So the Ford government actually got rid of the double header issue last year or the year before. I can't remember, but it was recent. So my experience since that happened is that a lot of the full-time firefighters, if they get a job, we have one that's in Peterborough, I understand right now. So there's no risk of that. I mean, unless they move out of the area, but I mean, the 24-hour shifts, they can pretty much stay in, in their residence. So it's, they're working 7 days a month, basically, in the 24-hour shifts. So they go to their full-time job, they can still come back and work for us. So I don't see that being a risk of the use.
I want to congratulate you on the number of new recruits that you've been able to attract to the department. That's commendable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor McDonald, who works in the dump. I just want to commend the chief on his recruitment program, and that he's got some firefighters that are coming back to the fire department, which is great. So that was a comment I was going to make. So congratulations on that. Good job.
Okay, if there aren't any other comments, we'll vote on this motion. All those in favor? Carry. I found it's seconded by Victor Hayes that council accepts this report from the fire chief regarding the water damage subsequent from the roof design and location of solar energy panels. And further, that the council provide direction to the fire chief on how to proceed with the repairs and remedy the issue of excessive snow and ice. Discussion. Tom, and then Rick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I think the first thing we gotta do is get those panels off the roof and then reinstall them on the south property there, south of the building. But before we do that, I really think we need to ask for an analysis on the cost of doing all of this, and also look at what our revenue has been over the years. Because if these things are not paying for themselves, then why are we going to spend all this money and not get any return on our investment? So I think we should do an analysis, but the first thing I think we gotta do is get them off the roof, and we also should get that roof fixed immediately, because the damage is getting bad. I've been in that hall, and he's got it in his, our chief's got it in the report here, and we can't let those walls deteriorate anymore. So I think we need to do some work on this before we actually put them back onto the property. So I think maybe we could involve Michael in that, so.
Rick?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, thank you for this report and thank you for your attention to it. I noticed in the report from the insurance company, they were identifying the damage, but there wasn't any suggestion as to what possible coverage we may have. They were quantifying the problem, but they weren't necessarily quantifying the solution in terms of how much to check. So I'm just wondering if the insurance company has given any indication where we stand in terms of coverage. Beyond that, the electrician's comments were that the inverter is fried, and that's a huge component of the system. And I think maybe touching on Councilor Dewey's point, does the cost of a new inverter make this whole project worthwhile? Because it's a huge component of the cost, and those panels are fairly old, and you know, we certainly don't want to throw good money after that. So I was just wondering if you had any perspectives on those.
Madam Mayor, Councilor, thank you for bringing that up. And also to Councilor Dewey's comment about putting on the south side, it's a septic bed, so we can't do that. Oh, so I looked at all our avenues on this. The panels are coming to their life there. I'd say they're about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through. The inverter, I'm told, is more than what the panels are worth to replace. We've had 2 fires, I understand, because of the inverters. So I don't see that would be feasible to put them back in, you know, on the roof. Obviously not a good idea because of the snow load, but to try and relocate them with a pad or everything else would be quite expensive. So I was given a quote of roughly around $15,000 just to get them set up. So I don't see that it would be worthwhile for that part to do that. As far as the insurance goes, that's been ongoing for the last 2.5 months. Ice damming seems to be a clause that excludes the coverage. This report that's attached to this, to my report, is from a third party that I asked that the insurance adjuster bring up. And I had the gentleman that I had contacted to look at it to meet together and look at the problem since the snow is gone. And they suggested it was partially, you know, or most of it was ice damming is what caused a lot of it. So I can come back with another report. I would say low with the dollar quote to repair the roof. I've got one but he says now he's had a better look at the roof. It's probably not going to be enough. Probably a bit more. It's not good news. I'm sorry. It's
Okay, it's reality. Bill?
Madam Mayor, I assume that the insurance policy was taken out at a time when the solar panels were actually on the roof. So it's not something that they weren't aware of that was part of the infrastructure of the fire hall. But I'm just wondering, I think, if I remember correctly, if I remember my memory serves, the annual return on those solar panels were in the neighborhood of $68,000 a year, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
And you're indicating here that we're at the 17th year of that contract, which is a 20-year contract. So even if they were operating at full capacity, we're getting the maximum, we're looking at maybe $24,000, and you're saying it's going to cost us 15 years to pay. So it doesn't seem to be that much of an issue in regard to making a decision whether we put it back up. But I'm wondering if in terms of the contract, if we can just dismiss it, or is there an opt-out clause that's going to cost us some money? I don't know that for sure, but you might have looked at it. You can see that, but I think the insurance companies are giving a bit of a shaft here for not coming forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councilor McDowell, it's on the eye of the beholder, I guess it's the contract, the way it's interpreted. I've had several discussions with the adjuster. And that's how this third party came to do the inspection. But our representative for our provider is in discussions with the adjuster. He says he hasn't got back to him. I spoke to him as late this afternoon, but he's not very hopeful right now at this point.
I think what I'm hearing is if it's going to cost us $15,000 to reposition these, we might want to have a fire sale. See if there's somebody who wants to get a few years out of them. Is that sort of what I'm hearing? If we're not prepared to sink a lot of money into these for another 2 or 3 years of use.
Well, and that 15. Through you, Madam Mayor. That $15,000 was just to set up the pad and the panels. Does that include the cost of the inverter as well?
Yeah.
So then the inverters they're really expensive. So we're looking well over $20,000 to maybe get $24,000 in their maximum output, if we're lucky. So I think that system is done.
I think so too.
And through you, Madam Mayor, to Congress. So to remove them, it's about $2,000. That's to have them taken off. Now the brackets will be still up there until they repair the roof assembly. But to get the panels off, it's about $2,000.
Okay. I think that's what needs to be done.
So I will come back with a report on the cost for the repair of the roof before we do anything. Is that agreement?
Yeah. That sounds good. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion? Carried. Thank you, Chris. Okay, we are now going to have our presentation from Terry Gervais of UMass, Community Risk Assessment and the Fire Master Plan. Yeah, Chris, if you want to come sit at the table. Terry, that's.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, Council. It's nice to be back in these chambers again. So what we want to do tonight is I'd like to just give you a brief overview of the community risk assessment and the fire master plan that we're going to undertake for your municipality. And I'll relate it back to some of the the work that you've been doing for the last number of years. You've done a tremendous amount of work in your municipality, and council's been very supportive of the fire services. And so the work that's been going on doesn't go away. You've come a long way. What we're hoping to do with this is to give you that vision for that next 10 years or 12 years. So you have that vision going forward. So it's not meant to scare you. I'm glad Mike left though. So it's not meant to scare you, and that's not. And one of the things that we're going to do through this with the new community risk assessment, I'm going to talk about that in a second. It's going to give you some actual risks. So years ago, we kind of said to councils, we need to do this because we think that was the right thing to do. What this is going to do is actually show you your risks in your community based on a very, that's been put out by fire marshals. And then you can set your levels of service by your risk. And like the chief had said before, some of the specialized services and stuff like that. If there's no risk there, then why are you doing the service? If there is a risk there, then you should be looking at doing the service. So, next slide, please. Thank you. I'll just breeze through this slide. I mean, you kind of been working with the Loomis Group for several years, so we are kind of getting more diverse as we go and have been expanding. We're now up to 50 employees, and we're almost all but the eastern provinces. We're now Montreal to British Columbia, so which is good. Next slide, please. So this is your team. I'm still the project lead and be kind of the lead for the chief. The team that we've assembled, Tony Van Dam, who's a community risk assessment specialist. He does the majority of our community risk assessments. Tony is a current fire chief in a municipality and very well versed in the fire service. He's also a member of the board of directors of the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs, so he brings a lot of knowledge and to the table of what's going on in the province. Chris Burke is a stakeholder engagement specialist and one of our content writers. Chris spent over 30 years in the fire services, all with volunteer services and career. Chris worked for the city of Ottawa, and he was actually one of my partners when I was a sector chief in Ottawa. Jerry Pinjatori, the project advisor. Jerry retired as the chief of the city of Ottawa. And you might say, well, you know, he's the chief of the nation's capital. But again, Jerry spent his whole year being a volunteer, working with volunteers, and was the chief of the largest cops department in Canada. So I think he brings a lot to the table. Emily Avery is our quality assurance lead out of our Kingston office. So what Emily's job is to keep me on track and to keep us and make sure that the document that we're putting together for you is accurate. And the recommendations are bringing forward. We've said something in the document that, you know, matches up with the recommendations. So, and she has a team leading that behind her. So the community risk assessment. So the legislation came into effect in 2019, July 1st. So it requires all fire departments to do a community risk assessment by 2024. Previous to that, in the Act, the Fire Protection and Prevention Act, you had to do a simplified risk assessment. So one of the things that this does, and I mentioned it a little earlier, it ensures that the municipality gets an evidence-based, or is allowed to make evidence-based decisions based on your actual risks that are in your community. And as everybody, and that's why I'm here, you've retained us to do your community risk assessment. I applaud the chief for moving forward on the community risk assessment. We had some chiefs do it last year, but I can tell you our phone is starting to ring off the hook because 2024 is not that far off. And 2023 will even be busier, I'm quite sure. So it falls in line to do it earlier rather than later. The community risk assessment that we're doing that has been asked to us to do has been set by the province of Ontario by the Fire Marshal's office. So it's not Terry sitting in his little office saying, okay, let's build a matrix. And it's actually a system that's been published by the Fire Marshal's office. So the numbers that we do, the grading that we do, the matrices we use are all kind of cast for us, if you will. So we don't manipulate the numbers. We take your data, we bring it in, and we do the matrix, and out the other end pops some of your risks. These are the 9 profiles that we look at through the risk assessment. So I don't necessarily agree, but there's some really interesting ones. What happened in the simplified risk assessment, we never looked at economics. So you might have industry or farming operations that if you lost, that could have an economic impact in your community. So I think it's a good one and it's been added to it. This is kind of our approach. So I introduced you to the team that all have experience in managing fire and emergency services, all working with volunteer services, and all experience with smaller to medium to large communities. It's really built on your data. So we look at the data that you've been collecting for the last, we take a 5-year window, we look at your data and we plot it into these matrices and they start looking at it. And then out of that, we'll end up how we're going to recommend how you manage your risks. Your engagement sessions will be with the fire chief and the deputy chief, the district chiefs and the officers. One of the things we do at this stage in the community risk assessment is once we kind of get what the risks are, or what the matrix kind of looks like, we sit down with the officers, because they're the ones going every day on their calls. So sometimes they might see a risk that didn't come up with the data because we're not recording it, but they go to the calls and they see that risk. So, and then at the end, then we'll analyze it and we'll recommend best practice or some risk treatment plans to manage your risks. Then that'll lead us into the fire master plan. And again, I applaud the chief for doing them both because it really will help with your fire master plan when you're making the recommendations to council based on risk rather than based on what we thought or think might be right. So yes, you had a couple, I mean, I've been involved in some of your org reviews. Your previous chief did an organization review as well and looked at a gap analysis. So all that information, like I said, we're going to be able to build on. So what the purpose of this is, one of the things we're going to look at is your compliant. I know from working here how compliant you have been and you've got to your compliancy. So we're going to review that. We'll provide recommendations on those 3 levels of service. So public education, code enforcement, and fire suppression. It allows staff to provide council with the necessary information to make the proper decisions for the lives and property, protect lives and property in your community, and will help provide a clear picture of current and future needs of the community for your emergency services. The fire master plan isn't meant to be a bad news story. It's not meant to say, oh my goodness, look what you got to do. It's really meant to get that snapshot of what you're doing and try to provide you with a vision of what kind of will be in the future. So the chief, talked to us tonight about certification. So obviously one of the sections we'll be looking at is in certification. What is the impact? Not just today, what's the impact in 5 years and 10 years down the road? We talked about the vision, but we also to help keep and provide proper budgeting for you. There's nothing worse than having to come to council and say we need more money because something happened that we didn't foresee or we didn't have the visions for. And we'll make sure that the resources that are available are used in the most cost-effective and efficient way. So one of the things the fire master plan will look at, will be shared services. So what can you share with your partners? What can you share with the other municipalities around you? When you talk about specialized services, there's not a single department in Frontenac County that can solely do, in my opinion, any one of the specialized services. It's very expensive, but what can you do together? So if there's a need for a certain specialized service, can we work together to provide that service? The framework, sorry, next slide, please. Sorry, I keep forgetting that pass. I apologize. This is the framework, and this isn't the final framework because as we start working in the document after the CRA, some of this might change a little bit because of the good work you've been doing the last several years. We may put some together, or we might say, you know what, it's not even worth bringing in the document. So we'll look at the legislation and your bylaws. We'll look at your structure and what way you've got it. Public education and code enforcement is so important. Review the community risk profile. We'll look at the training. We'll have a look at your life cycle programs and your asset management programs. We'll look at budgeting, emergency response, any agreements that you might have, your emergency management program, which again is legislated, fleet and equipment, specialized rescues, water supply, and performance management. So that's kind of like, if you would, the table of contents, if you will, for the document. But again, it could change a little bit, or there might be something that, as we're meeting with the staff, something might come up that we're going to add into the document. The stakeholders, so the fire master plan is in the center, but the stakeholders are our council, obviously your residents and your businesses, your staff, municipal partners, and firefighters. One of the things that we've been doing since COVID started is we've been doing virtual surveys for businesses and residents on the fire services and what levels of service they might want to see, or do they know what levels of service the fire service has. So that's something that we'll be discussing with the chief on whether we want to. We used to do town hall sessions, but we haven't been able to do that, but we're certainly willing to do a town hall session if that's the direction of the chief. Similar to what we did back in, I think, 2016, we're going to do a firefighter SWOT analysis, so strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And it will be very interesting because I have the original one. It'd be very interesting to see what 5 years later also looks as well. But in that session, and we're starting tonight, as a matter of fact, so we'll have those series of questions. We need the input from the firefighters. and the officers. It's important. They have to be a, part of this moving forward. We'll facilitate it tonight. We'll also offer one-on-one sessions with them. And also we'll be sending a survey to them that there's with all the same questions, but sometimes when you get into these sessions, some people feel comfortable speaking, some people don't feel comfortable. So we really want to make sure that everybody has that chance to have their say in the SWAT. Once we get that SWAT, we'll look at some common themes. We're not going to have individual things, but we'll look at some common themes across, and that'll help us form the document as well. And with that, that's my short presentation, Madam Mayor, and I'm certainly willing, as always, to take any questions.
Okay.
Mike.
Bill, you can start.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Terry, I have a couple of questions, and maybe you can answer them already quite quickly. Is there a possibility that your risk analysis is going to mean that we will have to have specialized training for responders? That would be one question I would have. For example, if we do actually have a high number of what you call them, special homes in the area that may be in the case of a fire, how do you evacuate all the people that may not be capable of preventing a fire? I'm just wondering how this risk assessment plan will fit into our emergency plan that we may be adopting in the community as a whole. But those are a couple of questions, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So going back first to the specialized training, so quite conceivably there is that possibility. So I'll give you an example. With knowing this community fairly well, one of your risks will be wildland fires. So that, if you weren't doing wildland fire already, if you didn't have brush equipment, that's something that we might be recommending in the fire master plan, that you need to kind of get into wildland firefighting. Same as your VOs, if your vulnerable occupancies, if there's if you have a number of them, then they're identified as a risk. The risk treatment plan we will look at, a lot of times when it comes to fires in residentials or commercial or occupancies, the risk treatment plan talks about inspections and smoke alarm programs, not necessarily changing what the firefighters are doing, but trying to prevent the fire before the fire. So that is that possibility for sure. If you had the departments that are on the 401 corridor, for example, one of their risks becomes, hazardous materials, for example. So if they weren't doing hazardous material, we might want to look at the master plan of recommending at what level of hazardous materials you might be in. So that's certainly a possibility. And I apologize. The second question, I went too down, but yeah, one.
Second one, sorry, I've got a question, but the risk assessment, how do you see that fitting into our emergency plan as a whole for the community?
So this is this risk assessment takes into account your hazardous identity risk assessment that you do for the emergency management. But this community risk assessment actually is more geared to the fire service. So for example, if flooding is an issue in your emergency response plan, but in the fire service perspective, flooding is really not a priority. They participate, and yes, they help, with doing sand. So this risk assessment is from a life safety perspective, from a fire service perspective, if you will. Down the road, I can vision seeing that you'll have one risk assessment for your community, but right now you do your risk assessment for your emergency management and a risk assessment for your fire services.
And they dovetail.
They do dovetail, yeah. So part of it, and we'll also look at your critical infrastructure that you have. So that's one of the 9 profiles. So they will dovetail. We will look at the 2 of them and where they kind of marry up. But and that's sometimes we do presentations at council on the community risk assessment, and they go, well, wait a minute, that's not the highest risk in our community, flooding is. But it's about from a fire services perspective, a fire.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Terry. I have a very strange question, and you'll forgive me for going out on a limb on this. And I take your point about specialized services. As you said, no department in Frontenac County is master of all trades. I'm wondering from your perspective, looking at various fire departments, you know, here, there, and everywhere. What would be defined, you know, if we're talking about specialized service, we are by definition saying that there is essentially a sort of out of the envelope base service. And I'm just wondering if there was just sort of I'll totally accept if there's not an easy answer to this. What would constitute just a base normal service if we have some idea that this is a specialized service and that's a specialized service? I don't know if that makes any sense.
It absolutely does, Councillor. So, you know, one of the things that you have within your ENR bylaw currently, and we will look at going forward, you have core service, and then you have your specialized services or your extra services that the department does. So core services are really is the bread and butter, right? It's fire prevention, inspections, car accidents, single family dwelling fires, you know, the normal auto extrications, the normal stuff that we do every day. It's our daily stuff. The specialized or the extra services, which could possibly be identified in the risk assessment, is this, you know, those ones that you don't do very often, and you got to decide whether there's the need or not. So it falls in with water ice rescue, hazardous materials, confined space rescue, trench rescue. Those are the ones that are kind of the outside of your regular core for a lot of communities. Some communities, different story. If you were in Sarnia, for example, you know, hazardous material would be a core service because of the type of risk. So the good thing about the CRA and is it'll identify some of that outside of the normal core services for you and whether you want to do it. And what we need to remember is council has that ability to set the level of service. So if there's no calls for service and there's no risk in the community, you know, you might have a very good good backing to say, you know what, we're not going to be in that business. We're not going to be in I hate to pick one, but we're not going to be in that specialized services. So if you think of the core as the stuff that these guys are doing every single day, and the specialized stuff is there's the ones that, yeah, the risk might be there, but we may not do it very, very often. And they're the ones that you need to decide where you need to be in. And if you add into the training that goes along with that as well too, there's going to be some, you know, additional training that's going to be added to those specialized services. So long-winded, I hope I answered the question.
Well, it was a difficult question. I get the sense that core is very subjective in itself, and you know, core might not be the same in one area or the other. So I understand the difficulty.
Yeah, and Sir Chief, you're absolutely right. So when you set your core service through your ENR bylaw, it is for your municipality. So not anybody else, not other. So there's, you know, you don't need to do what they do 50 miles down the road. You need to look after what the needs in your municipality. So for sure, you're absolutely right. Core there isn't a blanket core that you would say that every municipality has to do. It's up to you based on recommendations of the fire chief. So you're very correct.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Cameron, just to add to what Terry's saying, the previous place I worked at, I was in charge of 25 lifeguards. So that's not, I think it's probably the only one in the province of Ontario, but that's what Terry's saying. So it's the marine programs. You may be on the St. Lawrence, you may be looking after the St. Lawrence, but did council want to have a marine program? No, right? So in Lake Erie, we had a large marine program because there was no resources around us to do that. There was a lot of calls for that. So it depends on the risk and what resources are available, and sharing of services that determines all that, and the council makes that decision. But that's pretty much what Terry's saying.
And if it may, and the reason, the way you develop those services is historical data. So we need to know what the department has been responding to, and looking at getting into details to the type of calls, and then that's what you set your core services off, and any specialized.
Okay, one of the things you mentioned was a town hall. The county's using, and the municipalities are using bank the table. And I know for a zoning bylaw, I see it on Facebook where they'll they'll talk about a subject, and then people comment. And I'm not sure, but I think it's something we could use for the fire master plan as well.
Sure.
I go and read every one of the comments, and they're excellent. I don't know if we answer stuff, but they answer them very well. And there's all kinds of range of comments. It's something to keep in mind. I think you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just kind of want to, my question dovetails on Brent's question. So this is a working document. So if we use all the historical data and we set it up and we say that we want to add lifeguarding as an extra service, but the chief over the next year realizes, you know what, we're not needing that. Is it a type of document that the chief, based on the knowledge he's going to gain over the next year or so, can go in and make changes and just bring them back to us to adjust it as needed?
So both the community risk assessment and the fire master plan will be dynamic documents. The community risk assessment needs to be done by legislation every 5 years, but what we've been recommending to the chiefs is update them every year, because things change. You may never have had a fire in a downtown core area or in an industrial, and all of a sudden then you have a fire, then it's what changes the matrix. So you're absolutely right, Councillor. It's a dynamic document. This will be their base. We provide the document to the municipality, and the chief with the staff can keep it updating. The fire master plan is very similar. You know, we're trying to forecast that 5 to 10 years out. The very first one that I did in the municipality where I was working, when I left almost 5 years later, there was 4 recommendations that life changed. So we went back to council and said, you know, we're not doing these 4 recommendations because, you know, the government took us this way or community took us this way or whatever. So for sure, when you get the document, the document will be a guide. It doesn't, the fire master plan, the document doesn't supersede anything that you're doing. You will receive the document, you'll review you'll comment the document, but if there's a procurement issue, the chief brings that back. If there's a change from what we said 3 years from now, he still brings it back. So it will not tie council's hands going forward to continue setting the direction and the policy for the department.
Okay, Bill.
Yeah. Chris, you can answer this just for my own information. When you talk about water rescue, you're not talking about responding to fires or emergencies on islands. You're actually talking about water rescue. There's a difference there that probably requires different equipment. Am I correct in assuming that?
Ice cold water rescue.
Through you, Madam Mayor, on behalf of the chief. You're absolutely right. So there's a number of types of water rescue, and then there's also suppression or fires for islands and that. So that'll be looked at as well too. Right. But again, based on your calls for service, if you don't have any, then you need to be in the business. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Yes, last one. I mean, for all of us.
Because we've heard over the past meetings that there's been problems with getting data or having the data put in that it wasn't filled out. Is that going to be a hindrance to this document being up to date, like be a hindrance to helping develop it? So, thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Gowdy. There will be a bit of a struggle for getting data. I understand that the records for some stuff, like inspections and so on, hasn't been current or going forward. It hasn't done a great job, but we are taking on a new records management system. And actually I was going to bring up to Councillor Dewey, we're looking after the bylaws piece now as well, program. So the records management system that I'm putting forward is with ICO out of Quebec. They're also going to have a bylaws component in there for us. So we will have record keeping of bylaws. So all the inspections will be done just like the fire inspections and a description of what's going to happen with that. So I've been in talks with the CAO on that, and we've decided that we're going to go ahead with the bylaws and keep council more current on that. But yeah, so it's going to be a challenge to get some of the records. We're already starting to get them together for limits. Donna's been working pretty hard on that, and we hope with the emergency plan there might be some information we can draw from that as well. So yeah.
wait, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So there are some other areas, some of the response data we can get through the fire marshal's office that's been submitted. One thing I'd like council to know is that nobody has been tracking the data exactly the way this community risk assessment is. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. So a couple of things. One, we look at other areas. We look at your tax rolls. We work with the finance department, the building services department to get some of your building stock. So that's one way. But the other thing this will do will allow the chief on to go forward. Now that we know the way you need to track the data, he can design the systems so it becomes much easier. So don't, it's not unique to for us to have a challenge to gather up some of that. So.
Okay, I'm going to read this motion, and this is moved by Victor Hayes and seconded by Bill McDonald. The council received a presentation from Gary Jervay of the LUMAX group regarding the community risk assessment and fire master plan for information. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Here. I'm going to suggest we take maybe a 10-minute break and grab a cup of coffee and then come back. 5:20, we can share it out. Take us up.
Very good.
Terry, there's lots of coffee in my kitchen. 52 bits, don't 47. Or that. We're interested in there with me.
I suppose you've already applied for your tag.
You? Still got a little bit of time. I always do that.
I never do it.
You probably go.
The second little lights. I actually have an owl who
All I ever get there is squirrels, turkeys, wild turkeys.
And but we had it. I fed probably 25 months. I've been like it,
Yeah. Oh.
We'll talk to you. So we get to free church, turn right, exactly.
No.
There's this one on board.
Yeah, so we're gonna do it. Because COVID really kind of decided. But yeah, I don't know. Every now and then I get COVID.
I know, I need
Yeah, so
this is all, yes. Yeah. Trains over.
They put on like the white yeah. So workers do our
I can't yell that thing up. It looks like it's pretty bad.
Yes, inward.
I hope this meeting goes on for another 2 hours. I got nominations.
Who wants that to you?
Blue Jays. Blue Jays.
Yeah, and the whole thing.
You want that home run by Bo?
Yeah, at last, because
Yeah. Well, he was high, but it's been.
where they did something.
Made a couple errors.
The good thing is Joey's missing. So.
Yeah, I know, but I'm so happy that he got that last night. I like him as a player. Too. Very well. Great job. And glad the first baseman, he's such a fun Hey? You would have Monday off, make sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you started early, you started in January. Yeah, it's well, we're starting.
I think I can smell roast beef.
I will be bringing a report for the next meeting. So I have all the dates.
It's only this one. Shall we go back to work? Our coffee break is over. And we will start with a motion moved by Victor Hayes and seconded by Bill Smith. Whereas the Township of Central Frontenac and the Township of North Frontenac are parties to a shared building department services agreement dated August the 24th, 2018, which is in place to provide for backup coverage for chief building official positions for each township. And whereas the Township of North Frontenac has recently hired a new chief building official effective April 2022. Now therefore be it resolved that council accept the recommendation of the ZAO clerk to pass the bylaw appointing Henry Donald Reed as deputy chief building official for the Township of Central Frontenac later in the meeting. Discussion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just as a way of explanation, are we sharing this individual with North Frontenac? I got that impression.
Got to explain.
Okay. What it basically says is that if Andy's away, then Don Reed will come in and help with us.
Right.
And same as what Andy does the same. So that's what it's all about.
So it's North Frontenac building inspector that will cover for us because we cover for them. So it's part of the sharing agreement.
Okay, so it's just a paper trail.
Well, we have to add him to our bylaws so that he has authority.
That's right. Okay.
Okay. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Moved by Bill Smith, seconded by Victor Hayes, of the minutes of the Quincy Conservation Authority Board meeting held February the 17th, 2022, be received for information. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Moved by Victor Hayes, seconded by Phil Smith, that the minutes of the Quincy Conservation Source Protection Authority meeting held December the 16th, 2021, be received for information. Discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Victor Hayes, seconded by Phil Smith, that the minutes of the Kennebec Recreation Committee held March 22nd, 2022, be received for information. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Correspondence. Moved by Brent Cameron, seconded by Nikki Gowdy. The following correspondence be received for and filed for information, and it's number 1 to 9. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we have no delegations. Communications correspondence, we did, no public meetings, so we are at bylaws. Moved by Nikki Gowdy, seconded by Brent Cameron, that bylaw 2022-24, being a bylaw to appoint a deputy chief building official, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 26th day of April 2022. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Brent Cameron, seconded by Nikki Gowdy, that bylaw 2022-25, being a bylaw to establish and require payment of fees and charges for certain services provided by Central Frontenac Fire and Rescue for emergency or non-emergency incidents, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 26th day of April 2022. Discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Okay. Is there any notice of motions?
No, there is none.
Is there any giving of notice of motions?
No, Madam Mayor.
Any new or other business?
No.
I have a motion to go into close. Moved by Nikki Gowdy, seconded by Brent Cameron, that council move into closed session pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act regarding 1, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, section 239(2)C, Hinchinbrook School. 2, labor relations of employee negotiations, section 239(2)B, building inspector position. All those in favor? Motion's carried.